Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with Well Formula Podcast, and we are Friday again, and I have made it a habit to do some of these sort of self-helpy discussions, and actually they're getting such positive feedback, so I guess I will just continue doing that. And this week we're going to talk about habit formation. We've talked about it a little bit sort of in terms of running away from pain and running to pleasure and stuff like that. But this is kind of more the science habit formation, specifically focusing on exercise. And the reason I brought this one up is because I've actually been working on another project. As you may know, I have another podcast, CPO with Buck Joffrey, which is regarding longevity and health. And one of the things I was talking about in there is how powerful, some of the habit formation becomes when it comes to exercise. I used to be a guy who, a few years ago, I really didn't exercise as much as I needed to. And, now, especially after COVID, especially after going through, divorce and stuff like that, I ended up developing some habits almost by accident, just because I was doing things every day. Like I was hiking every day, and the next thing you know, it became like a habit for me to have exercise. So anyway, I want to kind of talk a little bit about habit and the science behind that. And maybe this is even more of something for my health and longevity crew, but it shouldn't be just for them. This is something I think we can all benefit from, whether that's, business, relationships, or even health. It all boils down to power habits. So let's start again with what I was talking about, like sort of the science behind habit formation. And this is from the psychology literature. So it's not something I'm making up. It's stuff that's studied. So the basics, every habit you have, good or bad, follows really a simple blueprint, and it's called the habit loop. First, you have the cue. That's your trigger, the spark that sets the habit in motion. It could just be something like waking up and then you do something. Or maybe it's the afternoon slump or at work and you do something. And then there's the routine. It's the action that you take in response to that cue. So, for example, above, maybe when you're waking up, you always wake up and immediately look at your phone. Or, for example, if you are having that afternoon slump at work back in the 80s or 90s when people would walk out and start having cigarettes. They probably still do, but I live in California, so I never see anybody smoking cigarettes here anymore. So, and then there's the payoff, and that is what makes your brain say, I like this, let's do it again. It's a surge of satisfaction, that rush of ultimately the endorphins, it's a chemical thing, and it reinforces that loop. Now, here's the kicker. You actually do have the ability to design your own habit loop. In effect, you can create your own habit loop. You can fool your own brain into doing things, right? So research by Wood and Neal, published in Psychological Review, shows us that habits aren't just formed, they're engineered through repetition and reward. So if you want to build the habit of exercise, and that's what I'm going to focus on, but you've got to master this loop, okay? The next thing we need to know about when we talk about habit is dopamine. It's your brain's secret weapon. Let's talk about your brain's built-in motivator. It wants dopamine, right? That's a motivator for your brain. This is the neurotransmitter that gives you the, yes, I did it feeling. And when you do something that feels really good, like, nailing a workout, or something else, say you were lifting and you're trying to get to a certain weight and you just killed it, right? Then your brain gives you a hit of dopamine. It's your brain's way of giving you sort of the high five and saying you did a great job. It's Pavlov's dogs basically, getting their treat, okay? Research in Nature Neuroscience by Schultz tells us that dopamine doesn't just make you feel good, though. It creates a craving for that feeling again. And that's where this stuff gets really powerful. Because when you start associating exercise with that dopamine rush, it's going to pull you back into the gym, onto the track, or wherever you get your sweat on day after day. Again, I'm focusing on exercise because that's kind of what's been on my mind to try to get people to do more of. When do you feel most in control? When you've got a routine, right? The truth is that we are ultimately creatures of habit. So there was another study in health psychology that discovered that consistency is ultimately the key to forming habits. And what they found is it takes an average of 66 days to lock in a new habit. Now, 66 days may seem like a lot, but it's really just a couple of months. And actually, it makes a lot of sense to me because I hiked almost every day for multiple months, and it really did become a habit. But let's go back to exercise, because it's also context. You have to create this context to make it more, you have to make it the right environment. So picture this, you exercise at the same time every day in the same place. Your brain starts associating that time and place with working out. And before you know it, you're not even thinking about whether or not to exercise. You just do it. And that's the power of creating a consistent environment. And I'll just say again, to me, what's interesting is, for me, I think I'm constantly after some sort of dopamine hit when it comes to exercise now, because when I don't, and I don't consciously think about it as a dopamine hit, but if I don't exercise, it's not that I don't even feel good. It's just I feel bad. It's almost like for me, and I know a lot of you will think about it to relate to this. It's like not having a cup of coffee. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but I drink coffee every morning to wake up. If I don't, I feel awful. That's the way not exercising is for me now. Okay, so how to create the habit of exercise? Let's get practical here. Okay, first you got to start small, build some momentum. So massive action is great, but when it comes to building new habits, you got to, often start small, and that's often the secret to success. Tiny habits are really the way to go. If you make the first step so small that you can't fail, guess what? You won't. And you'll build momentum, and the momentum will carry forward. Start with, let's go back to exercise. Start with 5 minutes of exercise a day. Okay, you can do that for 66 days in a row. I bet you could do 5 minutes of exercise a day. That's it, 5 minutes. Right? You can do anything for 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes are the seed that will grow into a powerful habit. And once you nailed that 5 minutes, you're naturally going to start doing more. It's like a snowball rolling down the hill, and once it gets going, it's unstoppable. So I bet if you start doing 5 minutes of exercise a day, you're going to just increase that. But I'm just saying, just start with 5 minutes. 5 minutes, right? Easy. Okay. Now, the next tool is to stack your habits. In other words, the idea here is to, in the case of exercise, make it inevitable, right? So James Clear's Atomic Habits books talks about habit stacking, and he says this is where you piggyback your new habit onto something you already do every day. You have a morning coffee, great. While that coffee is brewing, drop down and do some push-ups. You're stacking the new habit of exercise into the existing habit of making coffee. It's seamless, it's easy, and it works. And again, I'll give you an example from my own life, which is that whenever I drop off my kids, especially when they were littler and they were at this elementary school, right across the street from it is this YMCA where I go work out. So literally every time I would go drop them off, I would stare at that YMCA pulling out. So I'd go straight to it and I'd work out. So that's sort of, I guess, a stacking of habits. The next thing, try to make it fun. Reward yourself, right? You're more likely to stick with something you enjoy. So, make exercise fun. Try to beat your personal best. Try to make some goals, stuff like that. If you can, leverage social support because there's always strength in numbers, right? So I think the classic example here when it comes to exercise is, trainers. Do you really need a trainer, especially once they show you what to do? Probably not. But if you have a trainer, it keeps you accountable. Then it becomes a social thing. I have a trainer that I use once or twice a week. I could probably do all this stuff on my own, but it's scheduled. I go there. It's kind of a social time. Get it done, right? Next, set some goals that fire you up. For me, and lifting weights, it's been quite a journey. My bench press has gone up by 80%. And that's been a big thing that gets me fired up, is trying to see if I can actually, continue to increase my bench press. And so having those kind of goals will fire you up. And, they don't have to happen right away. Start with your 5 minutes a day, and see where it goes. But eventually you might get fired up and start having some goals, and that'll definitely keep you going. Make sure you track your progress along the way, because again, that's a good motivator. For example, if you're benching, again, going back to the bench press thing, start, writing those down and track how much stronger you're getting, or if you're going for endurance, track that, or even just how many times you're exercising per week and how much you're exercising. That's going to be a real motivator. The counter to that is, of course, you gotta prepare for setbacks, because, for example, you may have a bad day or two. The key is you got to just keep showing up. Now, I've used the example here of exercise, but honestly, you can do this with anything. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully that was useful. That is ultimately the science behind creating habits. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.